The cap hit the linoleum floor. It rolled twice, brim over crown, and came to rest against the toe of a scuffed work boot. Nobody bent to pick it up. The old man in the faded field jacket just stared at the cashier, then down at the cap, then back up. His hand trembled once on the counter. Not from fear. From 8 decades of work and one bad shoulder that never quite healed after the jungle. Outside, a single crow called from a power line, and a delivery truck rumbled past on the 2-lane. Inside, the fluorescent light buzzed over a young man in a black polo shirt who had just told a Medal of Honor recipient that his money was no good here. His name was Earl Hadley. He was 78 years old. Stay with me on this one. Earl had stopped at the Buck Creek Sunoco the way he had stopped at it every Tuesday morning for the better part of 23 years. The station sat at the bend where State Route 9 met Old Mill Road, a square brick building with 2 pumps out front, and a hand-painted sign that still read Buck Creek Sunoco in the same blue letters the original owner had stenciled there in the late 70s. Earl could remember when those letters were freshly painted. He could remember when there was a screen door instead of an automatic one, and when the coffee cost a quarter and came in a styrofoam cup that burned your fingers if you weren't careful. He could remember Hank, the old owner, leaning on the counter with a toothpick in his mouth, asking Earl about his garden and his grandkids and the weather and the price of fence wire. Hank had been dead 9 years now. His son Bobby had taken over the place and run it for a while. Then Bobby had moved to Tennessee, and the station had gone to some company up in Columbus that owned a string of them across 3 counties. The new owners had repainted the pumps and put in a slushy machine and hired their own people. Earl didn't begrudge any of that. Time moved. Places changed. A man learned to take what was good from the present and leave the past in its proper place. He parked his pickup at Pump 2 like he always did. The truck was a 1994 Ford F-150, dark green, with a small American flag decal in the back window and a rust spot on the rear wheel well that he had been meaning to sand and prime for about 6 years now. He climbed out slow, the way a man with 2 replaced knees climbs out of anything. He set his cap on his head, the same dark blue cap he had worn for 40 years, the one his wife Marlene had embroidered with a small gold pin she had given him on their 10th anniversary. The pin was shaped like a tiny star. Earl had never told Marlene what the real one looked like. He had never told anybody, really, not even his own son, not the full story. Marlene had figured out most of it over 51 years of marriage, but she had the grace not to press. She had passed in the spring. The house was quiet now, in a way Earl was still learning to live with. He pumped $23 worth of regular into the truck, because that was what he always pumped, $23, no more and no less, a habit from the days when gas was cheap and 23 got you a full tank and a candy bar besides. He stood there with one hand resting on the truck bed and watched the numbers tick up on the old digital readout. The morning sun was just starting to clear the tree line behind the station. The air smelled like cut hay from the field across the road, and like the faint sulfur of the pumps, and like coffee from inside the store. It was a good smell. It was the smell of every Tuesday Earl had spent at this station, since Bill Clinton was in the White House. When the pump clicked off, he hung the nozzle back in its cradle, screwed the gas cap on, and walked across the lot to the front door of the store. He moved slow. He always moved slow now. There was a bench out front, a green metal bench with one slat missing, and Earl noticed somebody had left a paper coffee cup on it. He picked the cup up and carried it inside with him, intending to drop it in the trash bin by the door. He nodded at a woman coming out with a gallon of milk. She didn't nod back. She was on her phone. That was all right. Earl wasn't owed a nod. He pulled open the glass door and stepped into the cool, fluorescent hum of the store. The young man behind the counter was new. Earl had seen him there once or twice in the last month, but had never spoken to him. He had a name tag that read Tyler in white letters on a black background. He had a thin mustache that he was clearly still growing into, and a tattoo of something Earl couldn't quite make out on the side of his neck. He was leaning on the counter, scrolling through his phone, when Earl walked in. He did not look up. Earl dropped the paper cup in the trash bin, picked up a bottle of water from the cooler at the back of the store, and walked to the counter. He set the water down. He laid a $20 bill and a $5 bill next to it and waited. The boy still didn't look up. Earl waited a beat longer. Then he cleared his throat, soft, the way a man clears his throat when he doesn't want to bother anyone. Tyler glanced up. His eyes went to Earl's cap, then to Earl's jacket, then to Earl's face, then back to his phone. He didn't move to scan the water. 23 on pump 2, Earl said. And the water? Tyler set his phone down with deliberate slowness. He looked Earl up and down again. Earl had seen the look before, in different forms over the years. Usually it was younger men in airports who couldn't tell a service ribbon from a Christmas ornament and didn't much care to learn. Sometimes it was clerks who didn't like the smell of farm work. Once, a long time ago, it had been a hotel manager in a city Earl no longer cared to name. Earl had never made a fuss about any of it. He had just paid his bill or not and gone on with his day. "I can't take that," Tyler said. Earl tilted his head. "Sir, your money. I can't take it. Card only." Tyler tapped a small handwritten sign taped to the side of the register. The sign read "Card only" in marker. Earl had not seen it on his way in. The sign was small and tilted, and partly hidden behind a display of beef jerky. "Since when?" Earl asked. "Since this morning," Tyler said. "Manager's call," he shrugged. "Card or you put it back." Earl considered this. He did not own a credit card. He had owned one once in the 80s, and he and Marlene had agreed after a bad month that they were better off without one. They had paid cash for everything since then, including the truck and the addition on the back of the house. The bank in town knew Earl by name and would have given him a card the same day he asked, but he had never asked. "I've been coming here 23 years, Earl said, quiet. He wasn't arguing. He was just saying. "Cool," Tyler said. "Card only." Behind Earl, the door chimed, and a man in a high-vis vest came in for a soda. Tyler glanced past Earl at the new customer with something like relief. "I already pumped the gas," Earl said. "Then you should have checked the sign," Tyler said. Earl was quiet. He looked at the boy. He looked at the bottle of water. He looked at the $25 on the counter that had been honest American money in this country since before the boy's parents were born. He thought about Marlene, about how she would have laughed soft and shook her head and told him to come on home and let her make him a sandwich. He thought about the small star on the cap on his head and the bigger one he kept in a drawer with a velvet lining, and the 7 names he could still recite in his sleep, the 7 boys he had carried out of a place none of them should ever have been sent. He took off his cap. He set it on the counter next to the cash. The cap was old and soft, and the gold pin caught the fluorescent light and held it. "You got a manager I can speak to," Earl said. "He's not here till noon," Tyler said. He picked up his phone again. "You want to pay or what?" The cap sat between them on the counter. Earl looked at it for a long moment. Then he reached, and his hand trembled just once the way it had trembled before, and he picked up the cap and the cash, and he turned, and as he turned the cap slipped from his fingers. It hit the linoleum floor. It rolled twice, brim over crown, and came to rest against the toe of his scuffed work boot. Tyler did not bend to pick it up. He did not say a word. He looked back down at his phone. Earl bent slow, the way a man with 2 replaced knees bends, and he picked up the cap. He put it on his head. He left the $25 on the counter, took the bottle of water and set it back in the cooler on his way out, and walked out the door without another word. The door chimed behind him. The crow on the power line called once more. Outside, the morning was getting warmer. Earl walked across the lot to his truck. He stopped at the green metal bench with the missing slat and stood there for a second. Then he sat down. He sat down because his hands were shaking a little, and he did not want to drive yet. He reached into the inside pocket of his field jacket and pulled out the small thermos Marlene had given him for his 65th birthday, the one with the dent in the side from the time he had dropped it in the truck bed. He poured himself a small cup of coffee. He set the thermos on the bench beside him. He took a sip. He looked out at the highway. The sun was full up now. A pickup truck went by with a load of fence posts. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked twice and then stopped. Earl took another sip of coffee. His hand stopped shaking. He thought about driving home, about the chair on the porch where Marlene used to sit beside him in the evenings, about the dog he didn't have anymore and hadn't replaced. He thought about the boy inside the store and whether the boy had a grandfather, and whether the boy's grandfather had ever told him anything worth remembering, and whether it was Earl's place to be angry or whether anger at this point in life was just one more weight a man did not need to carry. He decided it was not his place. He decided he would finish his coffee and drive home and not come back to the station, and that would be the end of it, and the boy would never know who he had turned away, and that was all right too. A man's worth was not the kind of thing you announced. It was the kind of thing you carried. He took another sip. The coffee was still hot. The crow had flown off somewhere. The morning was very quiet. Then he heard the engines. They came in low and heavy from the east, from the direction of the interstate, 4 of them at once, the sound of large vehicles moving in formation at a steady speed. Earl set the thermos down. He turned his head. Gravel crunched under heavy tires as the first black SUV pulled off the highway and into the Sunoco lot. Then the second. Then the third. Then the fourth. They were full-size, tinted government plates, with small American flag pins fixed to the corners of the windshields. They came to a stop in a precise diagonal formation that took up the entire side of the lot and faced the front door of the store. The door slammed open almost in unison. 8 men stepped out, then 10, then 12. They wore dark suits and earpieces. 2 of them wore the dress uniform of the United States Army with stars on the shoulders. 1 wore the dress uniform of the Marine Corps. 1 wore navy whites. They moved across the lot with the smooth, coordinated quiet of men who had done this in much harder places than rural Ohio. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. The lead man, a 4-star general with silver hair and a chest of ribbons that would have taken a careful eye 3 full minutes to read, walked directly to the green metal bench. He stopped 2 paces in front of Earl. He brought his heels together. He raised his right hand in a salute so crisp it could have cut paper. He held it. "Master Sergeant Hadley," the general said. "Sir, we've been looking for you." Earl looked up at the general. He looked at the salute. He looked past the general at the 11 other men standing at attention in a half circle around the bench. He recognized one of them. He recognized 2 of them. The Marine in dress blues he had not seen in 53 years, but the face was unmistakable, even at 74, even with the white hair and the medals. The Marine's name was Daniel Mercer. He had been 19 the last time Earl had seen him. Earl had carried him 3/4 of a mile through standing water with a sucking chest wound, and the Marine had lived, and they had said goodbye at a field hospital, and Earl had assumed for half a century that was that. Earl set the cup of coffee down on the bench beside him very carefully. He stood up. His knees hurt. He did not show it. He returned the salute. His hand was steady now. "General," he said. "Sir, we are honored," the general said. "We have been trying to reach you for 3 weeks. The town parade is at noon. The Joint Chiefs would like the honor of escorting you to the reviewing stand. The President recorded a message. We were given this address by your son this morning. We came directly." Inside the store behind the glass, Tyler had set down his phone. The general lowered his salute. So did Earl. The Marine in dress blues stepped forward and put a hand on Earl's shoulder. He did not speak. He did not have to. There were tears at the corners of his eyes, the kind a 74-year-old man does not bother to wipe. Earl put his hand over the Marine's hand and squeezed. "Once." The Marine nodded. "Earl," the Marine said. His voice was rough. I named my boy after you. He's a colonel now. He's in that vehicle." Earl looked past the Marine at the third SUV. A man in his late 40s was standing by the open door, in dress greens, watching. The man saluted. Earl returned it. "Master Sergeant," the general said. "Forgive me, sir. We can talk on the way. The motorcade is on a schedule. The streets are blocked. The town is waiting." "General," Earl said. He paused. He looked at the green metal bench. He looked at the thermos. He looked last at the glass door of the Buck Creek Sunoco, where the boy in the black polo was staring out at the lot with his mouth slightly open and the color leaving his face. Earl looked at the boy for a long second. The boy did not look away. He could not. "General," Earl said again. "There is one thing first." The general followed Earl's eyes. He saw the boy. He took in the cap and the dropped cash on the counter visible through the glass, and the small handwritten sign, and his face changed only slightly. He had seen 1,000 things in his career. He knew the shape of this one immediately. "Sir," the general said, "how would you like us to handle it?" Earl was quiet. The lot was quiet. The flag on the pole at the edge of the property snapped twice in a small breeze. Somewhere on the other side of the field, a tractor started up. Earl thought about the cap on his head, and the boy inside, and what Marlene would have wanted, and what 50 years of silence had taught him about the difference between revenge and reckoning. The first was small. The second was not. The first was for the man who had been hurt. The second was for the next man who might be. "Have someone speak to the manager when he arrives at noon," Earl said. "Tell him what happened. Tell him who was standing at his counter. Tell him I do not want the boy fired. I want the boy taught. Tell him to take the boy to the parade. Tell him the boy can stand at the back of the crowd and watch. Tell him the boy is to look at every face that walks past and to ask himself which of them he served this morning and which of them he turned away. Tell him the boy is to think about that. That is all." The general looked at him for a long moment. "Sir," the general said, "it will be done exactly as you have said." He turned to one of the suits and gave 3 quiet words. The suit walked to the door of the Sunoco and went inside. Through the glass, Earl saw the suit hold up a folded leather wallet, saw Tyler look at it, saw Tyler's knees go slightly soft, saw the suit guide Tyler to a chair behind the counter and put a steady hand on his shoulder and begin to speak. Whatever the suit said took about 90 seconds. Earl could not hear it. He did not need to. Outside, the general gestured to the lead SUV. The door opened. Earl walked across the lot beside the general and the old Marine. He did not look back at the store. He walked the way he had walked off a Hercules in 1968, head up, hands at his sides, jacket faded but clean, cap straight on his head with a small gold star catching the morning sun. He stopped at the door of the SUV. "My truck," he said. "We'll have it driven home, sir," the general said. "By a captain. With respect." Earl nodded. He climbed in. The Marine climbed in beside him. The door closed. The motorcade pulled out of the lot in formation, 4 black SUVs in a smooth line, gravel crunching, engines low and steady, and turned east toward the town square where 10,000 people had been waiting since 7 in the morning for a man whose name most of them only knew from a plaque on the wall of the high school gym. Inside the Sunoco, Tyler was still sitting in the chair behind the counter. The suit had laid a single document on the counter in front of him. It was a printed photograph. It was old and grainy, and showed a much younger man in jungle fatigues with 7 other young men beside him, 6 of them wounded, all of them alive, all of them looking at the camera with the kind of expression that does not happen in any other situation a human being is ever in. At the bottom of the photograph in small white letters was a date and a place and a citation number. Tyler stared at it. He did not pick it up. He did not move. The suit watched him for a long minute, then nodded once and walked out of the store and got back into the last SUV, and the last SUV pulled away. The parade started at noon. The town square was packed shoulder to shoulder. Children sat on fathers' shoulders. Veterans in folding chairs lined the curb. The high school band played. Earl rode at the front in an open car beside the mayor, who could not stop apologizing for the wind, and the old Marine, who did not say a word the entire route, only kept one hand on Earl's forearm and looked straight ahead. People threw small American flags. Children waved. Old women cried. A bagpiper from the next county overplayed Amazing Grace from a flatbed. Earl raised his hand and waved back, slow, the way a man who has spent a lifetime not being seen learns to wave when he is finally seen. At the reviewing stand, the president's recorded message played over the speakers. It was 3 minutes long. It used the word humbled 4 times. It used Earl's full name twice. It ended with a single sentence in the president's own voice, slow and quiet, that said the country owed this man more than it could ever pay, and that the country knew it, and that today was the smallest possible beginning of saying so. The crowd was silent for a beat after the message ended. Then they began to clap. The clap did not stop for almost 4 minutes. At the back of the crowd, in a black polo shirt that did not quite fit, and with a paper photograph folded twice in his back pocket, stood a young man named Tyler. His manager stood beside him with one hand on his shoulder. Tyler did not clap. He could not. He stared at the man on the reviewing stand, at the cap with the small gold star, at the steady old hands folded in the lap of the field jacket, and he understood, finally, what he had refused to sell at 8:47 that morning. He had not refused a sale. He had refused a man. And the man had refused, in turn, to make him pay for it in any of the small ways a man can be made to pay. The man had asked instead that he learn. Tyler stood at the back of the crowd, and he learned. He learned for almost an hour. He did not move. By the end, his face was wet. His manager handed him a handkerchief without a word. When the parade was over and the speeches were done, Earl walked down off the reviewing stand on his own 2 feet, slow, the way a man with 2 replaced knees walks anywhere. He shook 100 hands. He hugged the old Marine for a long time. He thanked the general. He climbed into a quiet car, not an SUV this time but a plain sedan driven by a young captain, and he asked the captain to take him home by the long road, past the field of cut hay and the bend at Old Mill Road. The captain did. They did not pass the Sunoco. Earl did not ask to. There was no need. At home, he sat on the porch in his chair. Marlene's chair was empty beside him. He did not move it. He poured the last of the coffee from the thermos into the small cup. He took the cap off his head and set it on the small table between the chairs, and the small gold star caught the late afternoon sun and held it, the way it had held it that morning, the way it had held it for 40 years. He looked out at the road. A pickup went by. A dog barked once and stopped. Somewhere in town, a young man was sitting on the curb outside a gas station with a folded photograph in his hand, learning slowly what he had been holding. Earl closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about Marlene. He thought she would have been proud of him for what he had asked, and prouder still for what he had not. He opened his eyes. The sun was going down over the tree line. The evening was very quiet. He raised the small cup of coffee just slightly to the empty chair beside him. Then he drank.